Welcome to Weekly World News on SpringNectar TV, brought to you by Vibha Ramesh, Los Angeles, United States. First, the top headlines. America remembers 9/11, backlash against vaccine mandate. Indo-US platform to finance clean energy, plans to reduce carbon footprints unveiled. United Kingdom prepares to address next virus. Spain battles uncontrollable fires. 18-year-old Raducanu wins Women's US Open title. Over to news in detail. The 9/11 tragedy may have shaken America, but not the spirits of the Americans. 20 years after the Twin Tower blast, America recalls the deadly incident with tears, love, and silent memories. In commemoration of the close to 3,000 people that died in the attacks, families of the victims congregated at the 9/11 Memorial Plaza in New York on Saturday. The annual ritual of reading out the names of all the 2,977 victims took place this year too, with rock star Bruce Springsteen performing "I'll See You in My Dreams." Ruling and former presidents attended the ceremony.
I'll see you in my dreams.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden announced a new vaccine mandate last week in a bid to restore public confidence. As part of a six-pronged strategy, he announced that employers with over 100 employees must ensure that all their workers are either fully vaccinated or are tested every week for COVID-19. And any company failing to do so will be subject to a fine of at least $14,000 per violation. In his words, said in resentment over the unvaccinated population, many of us are frustrated with the nearly 80 million Americans who are still not vaccinated, even though the vaccine is safe, effective, and free. The mandate is expected to impact nearly two-thirds of the labor force. Supporting the move, Dr. Ashish Jha, Dean of the Brown School of Public Health, told reporters that what we need is things that work right now. So I actually think it will make a big difference. However, ever since the mandate was made official, there has been a strong backlash from Republican leaders and governors who have already made official their plans to sue the Biden administration. More evidence of the mandate being highly unpopular and negatively impacting employees came by on Tuesday as 6 employees of the LA Police Department raised a federal complaint against the requirements. According to them, the vaccine mandate is a direct infringement of their rights to bodily integrity and has created a hostile working environment. While the sparring continues, the virus steadily claims more and more lives each day. Moving on. India and the United States launched a joint platform on Monday with the aim of meeting their commitment towards decarbonizing economies. To that effect, the platform was launched by Environment Minister Bhupender Yadav and United States Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry to mobilize finance for clean energy. During the launch, Mr. Yadav remarked, "I hope this dialogue will work and deliver climate finance primarily as grants and concessional finance as envisaged under the Paris Agreement to strengthen climate action." And on Tuesday, the government announced its plans to ramp up efforts to generate more nuclear power in the next 10 years. To be more specific, plans are on to produce over 3 times more nuclear power so that its installed capacity reaches 22,480 megawatts by 2031. Meanwhile, a recent survey aimed at determining the impact of COVID-19 on the job market and individual career options revealed that many professionals are considering a change in career paths. According to the survey, nearly 59% said they were looking for a new job, and almost 70% of the respondents said they plan to switch industries. This is what Amazon remarked in a statement on the study. The study underlines the changing concerns, aspirations, and interests of Indian job seekers, particularly brought in by the COVID-19 pandemic. Professionals are looking at broadening their industries and skill sets to stay relevant in the changing job market. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, volunteers will soon be testing treatments and new vaccines in a controlled environment in Liverpool's Pandemic Institute. The institute has a dedicated human challenge facility outside the hospital, which is expected to speed up the process. According to researchers, COVID vaccines would have been ready for use months earlier had candidates been tested during the first wave of infections. The university has an extensive database of pathogens and hosts which are critical in driving the research, as well as identifying which animals the next virus may come from. Here's what Professor Daniela Ferreira, the head of clinical sciences at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, remarked about the efficiency of the facility. Here in Liverpool, I led one of the sites for Phase 3 of the Oxford vaccine study. We were able to set up really quickly. When the government implemented a national lockdown, the number of cases plummeted. We were expecting to have the vaccine study results in 3 months, but it took much longer because there was less community transmission. Over to Australia, leaders of the US, UK, and Australia announced a new initiative called AUKUS, which was set up with 2 primary objectives in mind. Firstly, the trilateral partnership would help Australia build nuclear-powered submarines, and secondly, to confront China. To this effect, teams from the 3 countries would be charting out a joint plan, which is expected to span over 1.5 years, to assemble the new Australian nuclear-powered submarine fleet. According to Scott Morrison, this will include an intense examination of what we need to do to exercise our nuclear stewardship responsibilities here in Australia. But let me be clear, Australia is not seeking to acquire nuclear weapons or establish a civil nuclear capability. Moving on, Spain has been fighting a devastating blaze for over a week now. The wildfires broke out in Andalusia last Wednesday and have engulfed over 7,400 hectares of land. The rapidly spreading fires were beyond control, compelling the deployment of military units. To this effect, 260 people from the country's military emergency unit were deployed on Sunday. News has it that close to 1,000 firefighters and emergency workers continue to put out the raging blaze, which forced the evacuation of over 2,600 people. Here's what Juan Sanchez, the director of Infoca's Regional Operations Center, said on the situation. Right now, we're probably dealing with the most complicated fire the Spanish firefighting services have faced in recent years. We've spent a lot of time talking about how difficult the abandonment of rural areas and climate change are making things. But now we're living through it for ourselves. I would ask everyone to wait until we've put out the fire and to avoid counting on easy solutions, like fires putting themselves out in winter. Because this is a complex problem with complex solutions. Over to Singapore. In view of the recent outbreak, the government has stalled reopening plans. The country recorded 837 cases on Tuesday alone, with 809 people requiring hospitalization. And on Sunday, the number of patients requiring oxygen almost doubled. Although the overall vaccination rate stands at 90% without taking into account children under the age of 12, and the death rate is also relatively low, the move to postpone reopening of the economy was made in light of the increase in the number of seriously ill patients. And in Kenya, severe drought has left nearly 2.1 million people on the brink of starvation. According to the National Drought Management Authority, poor rains have adversely impacted the harvest, and people in 23 counties are in dire need of food aid for at least 6 months. The drought that was announced by Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta last week has been coupled with the pandemic and has reached a crisis of sorts. Commenting on the situation, Asha Mohammed, Secretary General of the Kenya Red Cross, said, "You have 2 seasons of depressed rains, desert locusts ravaging farmlands in the same counties, and people fighting over the few resources available. That is the making of a disaster." Moving on to an interesting piece of news from the world of science. What would it be like if mammoths walked the planet once again? Well, this could become a reality if the latest project pursued by scientists turns successful. News from Monday has it that scientists are ambitiously working on a project to bring back the woolly pachyderms to the Arctic tundra. What's more, researchers have confirmed that a funding of $15 million for the project has been raised by Colossal, a bioscience and genetics company. A snippet from George Church, a professor of genetics at Harvard Medical School, read, "Our goal is to make a cold-resistant elephant, but it's going to look and behave like a mammoth. Not because we're trying to trick anybody, but because we want something that is functionally equivalent to the mammoth. that will enjoy its time at minus 40 degrees Celsius and do all the things that elephants and mammoths do, in particular, knocking down trees. Ending this week's bulletin with news from the sports world. 18-year-old Emma Raducanu engaged in a gripping final against Leylah Fernandez of Canada and went on to win the US Open women's singles with a score of 6-4, 6-3. And the men's singles title was bagged by Daniil Medvedev with 6-4, 6-4, 6-4 against Novak Djokovic. With that, I bring you to the end of this week's news bulletin. I will see you again next Friday with more world news on Spring Nectar TV. Stay safe.